mine, and asked, "You break up with my girlfriend?" A while back, and although we lived in an apartment together, she stood as the owner of it, so I had no choice but to move out. Thankfully, a good friend of mine allowed me to stay at her place until I could find my own crib. Since I only want to day around to the apartment, my choices were pretty limited. There is a low supply at high demand. It was a large, a 3-room apartment on the 4th floor with a view over the woods, and the rent was very low, and I immediately applied, and within a couple of hours I got a reply that I could have it play. I haven't left. It's because the contract and the rules forbid me from leaving. The contract is for a year, and honestly I don't expect to survive until it expires. The same day as I moved in, I found a letter addressed to me from the company that rented it. I opened the letter and I took out the paper which said rules for living in the apartment complex. Rule number 1, regardless if you were home or away, your toy must always be live. You do not want to have unwanted guests in your apartment. Should you forget to lock the door after leaving, and do not enter your apartment. When you return, call or support for instructions on how to proceed. Rule number 2, it is not forbidden, but we do not recommend leaving the apartment between 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. Some entities like to roam the building. If you want to leave your apartment, and not if you return to it. Rule number 3, if you leave the apartment between that time, always carry a flashlight, a bag of salt and holy water. The flashlight will repel the shadowy figures that you may see it. Should you hear footsteps behind you and no one is there, use these songs to create a salt ring. Should they react to it, immediately run back to your apartment and stay there until 5 a.m. If they do not react, it's safe to proceed. Rule number 4, the basement should never be visited under any circumstances between 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. If you should ignore this rule, then there is a high risk that you may never leave at. Rule number 5, if you are in the basement at any given time, with exception to rule number 4, and you hear growls behind you, ignore them and call me. Walk to the exits and do not run, because the thing that makes the sound will catch you if you do. Rule number 6, on Mondays and Thursdays your doorbell ring at exactly 3 a.m. Approach the door as silently. There will be an old man with a fancy hat outside and vitamin, and politely ask him if he wants food, and it doesn't matter what food you give him. After he has finished the food, he will thank you for your kindness and to leave the apartment. Do not refuse him, because if you do and then you die. Rule number 7, should objects in your apartment and move between locations poorly. No harm will be done to you if you fail to do this, but there is a risk that some objects will never be seen again. Rule number 8, do not stare into the mirror for longer than 5 minutes at a time. Should you forget about this rule, your own reflection will remain in, slowly make its way out of it. If this happens, any number of their apartment. If you wish to visit anytime, I answer, dial them and ask for the permission to visit. Should the doorbell ring and a tenant ask to come in, do not answer them and remain silent. It's not a tenant, as they would never come visit you. Before calling first. Rule number time, if you receive mail that is not addressed by the company Obama, do not touch it with your hands. Use a glove or something else to pick it up and immediately burn it. Should you pick it up, the mailman will visit you the next day and, trust us, you do not want to meet him. Rule number 11, if the light in your apartment turns off between at 9:15 and 9:20 p.m., find a place to hide until they have been turned on again, and do not worry. Yeah, the creature won't find you as long as you were hiding it. Number 12, any visitor at meeting visitors outside tenants must also follow the rules. If they break them, and then both of you and they will suffer the consequences. Rule number 13, and do not try and leave or move out until your contract expires. If you try and do this, then no matter where you go or you visit, you will always return to your apartment. I read through the rules repeatedly. Luckily for me, I've heard about rules such as, put this on Radisson. I know the seriousness of breaking them. However, it doesn't mean that they didn't scare the living hell out of me. To calm myself down, I made a cup of coffee and I went to watch TV. A few moments later, I heard the doorbell ring, which made me jump and spilled my coffee, but somehow I managed to stay quiet. Hello, a female voice of, but I didn't answer and I sat quietly on the sofa shaking with fear. Is anyone home? The voice continued, not much louder in medicine, but I remained quiet. I know you're home. Let me in. It said now when a demonic voice, and it started to bang on the door, with each bang having enough for us to knock the door down, but it held. This continued for 10 minutes until it stopped. After a couple 10 more minutes I got the courage to go to the door and look at the people and nothing was there, I said, and went back to the sofa. I looked at the clock and it said, at 9:14 p.m. Remember, in the role I went to my wardrobe as a precaution to have a chance to hide, since my in concert with 9 had shaking me to the core as it turned to 915 based on the heavy footsteps it made, and I could hear his sniffing around, and it took every amount of my willpower to stay quiet, and then left and the lights were turned on again. I carefully exited the wardrobe and sighed as the creature vanished. After that event I could not go to sleep, so I decided to watch TV yet, but somehow fell asleep. Then woke up to the sound of my doorbell ringing and I looked at my phone and it said at 3 a.m. This made me wide awake and I approached the door with the trembling stabs and I looked through the people. My entire body froze as I saw the old man with the fancy hat. I took a few seconds to collect myself and I opened the door. I would have expected a ghastly looking for, but he looked like a normal person, 70s, with pale complexion, messy gray hair, dark colored eyes and or a nice black tuxedo with a purple tie. However, I knew this wasn't an ordinary person, because every cell in my body is screamed at danger. The old man looked me up and down and said, and a friendly voice, "May I come in?" "Of course, sir," I replied as friendly as I could. The apartment. He took off his hat and put it on the shelf and went to the dinner table and sat down as I closed the door, locked it, and I said to the man, "Can I offer you some food?" And he replied, "Yes, I would like that." I nervously went to the kitchen to put together a dish, and while I did, the man stared at me without blinking and it said, "I have to." He was finished. He stood up and walked towards me and said, "Thank you for the meal and your kindness," before grabbing his hat and walking through the door. He literally passed right through the door. After he had left, I started hyperventilating and it took several minutes for me to calm down. I thought in the morning after work I'll go shopping for play differential against supernatural stuff. Not long after that I fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, and I won't get to my alarm clock the following couple of days and nothing paranormal happened to me, and I did not leave my apartment and during the evening and night, but I bought several protective charms and during my lunch break. However, the next day when I came home, I saw a letter lying in the doormat. I'm glad that I did, because it did not have horrifying scream and they made me drop it, and I looked down in horror as a blue flames consumed it. As I prepared my dinner, I couldn't find any frying pan in the kitchen locker. I remembered a rule number 7, should objects in your apartment to move between locations, pour the liquid that we provided you with on them and it'll stop. The liquid is located underneath the sink in the kitchen. No harm will be done to you if you fail to do this, but there is a risk that some objects will never be seen again. I took the bottle containing the liquid underneath the sink and I searched for it. I found it in the bedroom on the bed, and I poured a liquid on it, but nothing happened. To my surprise, after making dinner and a browsing on YouTube, I decided to take a shower before snapping out of it and immediately turn the shower off. Rule number 11, if the lighting your apartment turns off between at 9:15 p.m. to 9:20 p.m., find a place to hide until they've been turned on again, and do not worry, the creature won't find you as long as you're hiding. I didn't dare to move, and I think to myself, remembering to put up, but I waited a couple more minutes before turning the shower on again, and luckily, nothing happened to me. As I stepped out of the shower, I froze in fever and cursed on myself for my stupidity. As I remembered, I did not lock the door after entering it and finding a letter out of the bathroom to the door and locked it, a bag of salt in a bottle of holy water in it, and grabbed the keys as I left the apartment and made sure to lock it. And I looked at the phone and I said 11 p.m. What was this possible? I thought there is no way in hell that it has been nearly 2 hours since I had stepped out of the shower. Rule number 3, if you leave the apartment between that time, always carry a flashlight, a bag of salt and holy water. The flashlight will repel the shadowy figures you may see. Should you hear footsteps behind you and no one is there, use the salt to create a salt ringer. I do not break into the footsteps of stopped. The holy water is for any people that you may encounter. To make sure they're real, spray it on them. Should they react to it, immediately run back to your apartment and stay there until 5 a.m. If they do not react and it's safe to proceed. My walk through the hallway, yes, but naked and every hair on my body stood up and I felt uneasy. I saw 3 shadowy figures, but I used the flashlight on and I poured a ring around myself. I don't know how long I still there, but I kept my eyes shut as I heard laughter and screaming around me. Apparently they left that out from the rule. The head eventually stopped, so I broke the ring and won on my way, and luckily I saw an old people I have to leave in the apartment complex. I ran to the nearest 7-11 surprised and horrified, but I managed to convince them to let me in by saying that I was robbed. They gave me some clothes and allow me to use the staff room, as they call the police. Now I have to calm me down. I decided to call the company support and inform them what had happened. The conversation went like this: "This is what can I help you?" With a female voice said, "Hey, this is John from apartment XX and I have a major problem that I need assistance with the guest room. That's one of our other apartment complexes. That place has a list of rules that are play different from the ones that you have. Follow them and you'll be fine. Since this is a first-time offense, you will not receive any punishment. I will send a car to pick you up." What about what? She had already hung up on me yet? Well, isn't this great? I thought when one of these staff had entered and told them. The cops are there. I told him what I told the staff and I saw that they didn't believe me. But they just dismissed me as being a weirdo, and after they had left, I thanked the 7-11 staff for helping me and I went out for a black sedan had waited for me. An hour later I arrived to guest apartment. It was a 2-room apartment with a kitchen and bathroom. On the bed or a box with my belongings and a letter that I went and picked up, the letter which said rules for living in the guest room apartment. Rule 1. Do not leave the guest room under any, and do not look in the mirror in the bathroom at any point. It will take it as an invite you will feel very tempted to looking at. So our advice is to use a blindfold whenever you have to use the bathroom. Rule 3. Should you look in the mirror, then pray the entities the bad before going to sleep. You forget about this. Then there is the food is stored underneath the sink. Rule 5. If an old lady by the name of Anna knocks on your door at any point and asks you to help her, ignore her and do not approach the door. She will disappear after 5 minutes. Should you not do so, then you will be dead in the morning. And rule number 6, if you hear a 3 tabs on the window, ignore it too as it wants your attention. If you hear 2 tabs followed by 3 quick tabs, find a place to hide until it is stopped. If you hear a crash while in hiding it and it managed to enter your apartment, remain quiet as it can only find you. If you make a noise after 3 minutes it will disappear. Rule 7, if you hear after from the ceiling that, do not look up. Ignore it and it will eventually stop. And my heart. After reading the rules I went from one highly play to many more. Alice Play's mind went through my stuff and thankfully all my protective gear was there, and I thought about calling the police but dreaded what could happen to them my side and thought that I will just not break the rules. I will survive. After my little pep talk, I pleased tell various protective gear. And after I was finished I sat down on the couch to watch some TV. Before dozing off I was jolted awake to both my amulet. A few seconds later the window broke and I heard the most horrifying girl. That nearly made me scream, but I managed to cover my mouth and I stood there quietly as the creature roamed the apartment and eventually ended the bedroom, and I saw through a crack in the door. It looked like a dog, except it had gray scales and limbs with claws that resembled talons, and his face was terrifying, burning red eyes with a wide mouth full of fangs. The ambulance stopped burning antacid of the wardrobe. Then, when I went back to the living room, the window was fixed and there was no sign of the creature had ever been there. I looked at my watch and it said 11:15 p.m. Great, only 28 more hours in this place. And I went back to the couch and that's what I heard it, a demonic laughter coming from about me. At the same time, I have to. Who are all this stuff? I just wanted to add, 5 minutes later, the knocking and we'll have to stop. As if my body had moved on its own, I quickly went and picked up the food underneath the sink and put it on a plate and placed it underneath the bed and then fell on top of the bed, and the next I knew I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. This is John the First Stamford and this is Teresa from the support, and we're all finished with your apartment. As I realized I had slept for nearly 28 hours. 2 hours later, I said, in the car on my way back to my apartment, I noticed that I put my ambulance in my pocket, and the moment that I touched the ambulance it burned by fingers. As it burned, my heart sank and I thought this was the end of the line for me. But I left the driver. I might as well put everything on the line, because what else do I have to lose? I took a few moments to gather up my courage and I asked, "Are you from the company or are you something else like?" I don't respond when I ask you a question. I said in angry or not even turned around and almost gave me a heart attack. Male skin with how the wires and no other facial features, and he waved his hand, causing me to lose consciousness. Next thing, I knew I woke up in my apartment and felt more rested than I've ever been. I got up and went to make coffee to make sense of what had happened since the gas department. It was then that I found a letter at the door remembering the rule. I looked at it and the letter had the company. This is what it said. "John, can you have lasted longer than any other guests before and you proved yourself capable of surviving the horrors of this place. We are very impressed with you and want to offer you a position within our company. If you join us, John, we will notify your contract and you will be free to live your life, but you will serve us until you die. Should you not accept your offer, then good luck at surviving until your contract with us expires. We want your answer, as will be possible. Don't forget, the rules still apply." The owner. What's in the everlasting hell, I thought, and I dropped my coffee. Yet I read the letter repeatedly and it sent chills on my spine, and every time that I read it, thousands of thoughts had rushed through my mind and I had to sit down. I can't do this anymore, and so I went and grabbed my cell phone and it said at 7 p.m, "I'm in desperate need of help. She arrived 30 minutes later to my place and I nearly crushed her and hugged. After talking for a few minutes, I showed her the rules. If you forgot about them, well, here they are. She looked at me like I was going to burst out, saying it's a prank, but my serious expression told her that I was dead serious. I bent shoulder the letter that I received and she looked at me questioning inside it. Why did you give me an empty paper? This sent off alarm bells in my head as I could perfectly read what it said. No, you may wonder why I did something like this, bringing in a visitor, because I wanted to see if I was still sane or if I had completely lost it. You know what, John? This was a mistake. She replied and she went to grab her call when the doorbell rang. My husband, do not answer. It is for real. Have you been living like this all the time? Now I'm not at a response. And I told her that you must follow the rules. I then told her about everything that had happened to me since I moved in, including the letter that only I could read. And you got to do something and call the cops, the FBI, the freaking army, she said after I finished my story. I don't think I've thought about that. But what would I say? Hey, I live in a supernatural apartment where some deeply disturbing supernatural calamities they would send me to a mental asylum. Before we can continue our conversation, the lights went out in my amulet begin to burn again and come on, I said. I grabbed her and rushed into the bathroom and put the draper on the bathroom around as the creature approached us that the lights went on and they moved. It stopped, but the ambulance was still burning. It was then that I realized my mistake and grabbed her hand and we made a run to the... I have completely forgotten that I have a little mirror in the shower bar facing the direction that I stood in it as we made our way to the door. I looked to back and saw a twisted version of myself smiling at us and I unlocked the door and managed to shut it as the twisted version of me and ran into it. What are the earth? Was that just terrified? As we ran through the hallways something messed up, I replied. I heard it demonic. After behind us, cast the evil me at, managed to leave the apartment and I ran after us and we approached the stairwell only to have the creature from before I stand in front of it. I'm sorry. I said to her for getting you involved and while I make a run for it, I will leave them away from you and give you the chance to get away. I'm not listening for a reply. I took off. My idea worked as they went off after me. As I ran from evil me at a large dog, bear-like creature with gray fur, burning eyes, and a twisted face, an idea came into my head. I ran to another staircase and then down to the basement, with them following me. I had managed to open the door to the basement full of you, the two creatures rushed into it. And yes, they did. I pulled the door shut. I could hear it terrifying as they banged on the door, trying to escape. Before I go inside, out of the door, I went back to my apartment and on my way there the amulet did not burn. When I sat down on the couch when my phone rang, was shaking hands. I looked at it and the display said unknown number. I answered it and heard a very deep and dark voice say, "Well done, John. You've exceeded my expectations. Will you take my offer or not?" "I'll take the offer." I replied to whatever the thing was on the phone and immediately its tone changed from a deep and medicine to a calm and polite one. "Next one, we will send you a car within the hour and once you arrive, you will be giving your first task." The thing up immediately had disappeared. However, what I didn't know was that this feeling would be replaced with a much more terrifying one. An hour later, I heard a knock on the door. I went to it carefully and opened it, and a 7 feet tall man with pale skin and no hair, of facial features except a pair of holloways, with a blue uniform. That said the mailman, still there. I stared at the beginning, blurry, because the moment I sat down in the car I passed out. I woke up in a white room with no doors or windows and don't need a red office chair with a man sitting in it. You're awake, that's good. The man said and turned the chair around, and I expected another horror figure to sit in it, but to my surprise, the being looked like an ordinary human. He appeared to be in his mid-60s, with gray hair and dark brown eyes and a light complexion. He was tall, much taller than me, and play red tuxedo. I felt a dread I feel in my body when he flipped his hand and he pulled the amulet from me. No, you won't be needing this anymore, and he crushed it between his hand. My name is Apollonia and I'm the owner of this company. He raised his hand and brought me and kneeling in front of them. I was terrified and I couldn't stop shaking. I remembered that I've heard that name sometime before, but I couldn't make the connection. Would you like to me? And I have to? No need to be afraid, John. I want to harm you unless you give me a reason to do so. And he gestured for me to stand up and you took my offer. I'm good, but to be sure that you are sincere with your decision and not trying to use it to save yourself, I will give you a task. If you fulfill it, then I know you're a part of us. However, if you do not, then I will make you experience things that are beyond anything you've experienced at the apartment. He smiled at me and waved his hand, and I found myself back at the apartment with a note that said, I want you to give me 3 souls. You were choosing that you have a personal tattoo. As I read it, I heard a knock on the door and I opened it. The demonic mailman entered, running down my face, and I wanted to scream. I shook with fear and anger as I not only realized what I had to do, but also who I dealt with the bad, and I said lolly, which caused the mailman to form a smile on his face using his fingers. It's been about a month since I took the job offer and provided that 3 souls to the demon about him. I won't disclose who I choose because I'm deeply ashamed of my actions, but I'm free from the roles. I'm allowed to spend my time how I see fit. However, when a bad end reaches out to me, I must answer. I'm terrified all the time and I started drinking and I barely sleep. I've done some horrible things. I tried one time to refuse and that made me experience horror. That's made everything I felt in the apartment look like a children's movie. I traded myself from something horrifying to something far more horrifying. The worst part is that, beneath the constant fear, I'm beginning to enjoy my new job. Not my job is to write it in forces. Supernatural rules for a rental company, and my current target is a new apartment building where my ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend will move into. Live come up with a really good set of rules, probably some that you are really familiar with.